The war had ended, at least on paper. Across the burned skies of the planet Varkan, the scent of plasma and scorched soil still lingered. Shattered citadels of the Threx Confederacy stood silent, their metallic towers cracked open like the ribs of a fallen giant. And among the ruins walked humans, the victors of a war that no one, not even the galaxy itself, believed they could win. Captain Elias Varren, 31st Terran Marine Division, had been on the front lines for 3 years. He'd seen the Threx battlelords fall one after another, watched orbital cannons blot out cities, and buried too many of his own to count. The galaxy now whispered the same phrase wherever humans marched. Fear the Terrans. They break worlds to save lives. The Threx, a proud reptilian species known for their rigid warrior caste, had finally surrendered. As per ancient tradition, the victors were offered a token of respect, a gesture symbolic but binding in their culture. The Threx Matriarch, Lady Vorkesh, approached Elias as he stood in the throne hall of their fallen capital. Behind her, lined in shimmering robes and ornate collars, stood 5 Threx females, each from a noble bloodline, each chosen for beauty, skill, or intelligence. "You fought with honor," Vorkesh hissed through her fanged mouth, bowing her massive head. "Per our covenant of defeat, the champion of the Terrans may take one of our daughters as his own. For alliance, for honor, for remembrance of the blood shared." Elias looked at them, 5 pairs of alien eyes gazing back. The first 4 were tall, slender, with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian. Their bodies were shaped to fit Threx ideals of strength and grace. The last one, standing awkwardly behind them, was different. She was shorter, rounder, her armor straining at the midsection, tail thicker than the rest. Her green scales had dull, uneven patterns, and she avoided eye contact. Her name, as Elias later learned, was Sha'are. A murmur passed through the Threx courtiers. Even among their kind, Sha'are was considered undesirable, soft, shy, too empathetic for a warrior race. When Elias finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. "I choose her," he said, pointing at Sha'are. A stunned silence filled the chamber. "You choose the large one," Vorkesh hissed, unable to hide her disbelief. Elias nodded once. "Her." The room rippled with unease. Threx soldiers looked at one another as though the human had gone mad. Even Sha'are herself flinched, confusion painted across her broad face. No one understood. Not even her. But Elias didn't explain. He just saluted, thanked the matriarch, and walked out with his new reward at his side. Middle. Sha'are followed Elias through the aftermath of the war, through broken cities, through the cold halls of Terran command ships. Everywhere they went, whispers followed them both. To many humans, she was a trophy of peace. To the Threx, she was a shameful reminder of defeat. But Elias treated her like neither. He gave her a uniform. He gave her duties. And most of all, he gave her respect. At first, Sha'are didn't understand. "Why me?" she asked one night, her deep voice quiet, hesitant. "Why not one of the others?" "Am unworthy. I was told I was too soft to fight. Too emotional to serve. Even my clutchmates mock me." Elias looked at her across the small fire on the edge of their encampment. "Because I saw you before the final battle," he said. Her yellow eyes blinked. "You saw me." He nodded. "You were carrying wounded soldiers. Threx soldiers. You crossed open fire to pull them out. No armor. No weapon. You just ran in." She shifted, tail curling nervously. I could not leave them." "Exactly," Elias said. "That's why I chose you." She tilted her head, confused. "You humans. confuse me. You win wars but weep for enemies. You kill yet mourn. You take a reward, but seek not beauty or power. He smiled faintly. Because we don't fight for glory, Share. We fight for each other. You did the same thing. That's rare in any species. From that day onward something changed. Share began to open up. Her laughter, deep and rumbling, echoed in Terran camps. She learned to eat human food, though she called it too small for proper digestion. She sparred with the soldiers, her heavy strikes and strange agility earning respect from even the toughest Marines. Soon the troops began calling her Mother Tank, a nickname she wore with pride. But beyond the jokes, something deeper was forming between her and Elias. They shared quiet talks about loss, duty, and the strange ache of surviving when others hadn't. She told him how the Threx empire bred out compassion, calling it weakness. He told her about Earth, about oceans, music, and dogs that loved you for no reason at all. She would listen for hours, her tail swaying softly as if mesmerized by every word. One evening, as Terran Command prepared for the peace conference that would finalize the end of hostilities, Share found Elias sitting alone in the hangar, staring at an old datapad. "Elias," she rumbled. "You look haunted." He turned it around. It showed a photo of his squad, 8 faces, 7 gone. "I keep thinking," he said quietly, "what they'd think if they saw me now, sitting across from the same people who killed them." Share stepped closer. "Would they not be proud? The war ends because of you." He sighed. "Maybe. But sometimes I wonder if peace costs more than war." Share placed a massive clawed hand on his shoulder, gentle as a whisper. "Among the Threx, peace is shame. Among humans, peace is purpose. You carry your dead with you, Elias. That is how you honor them." He looked up at her, and for the first time really saw her. Not as the fat alien girl, not as a symbol, but as someone good. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. The peace conference on KYRN station was meant to be routine. But nothing involving humans ever stayed routine. Midway through the negotiations, a group of Threx extremists, calling themselves the Sons of Scales, stormed the hall, intent on assassinating the Matriarch for dishonoring their species by surrendering. They'd smuggled in plasma rifles disguised as diplomatic equipment. Elias saw the first flash of light, shouted a warning, and dove in front of Vorkesh. The blast tore through his armor, sending him sprawling. Soldiers scrambled for cover. Chaos erupted. Before anyone could react, Shara roared, a thunderous primal sound that shook the chamber. She leaped into the fray, claws slicing through armored insurgents. Her massive body shielded Elias as bolts scorched her scales. She fought like a creature possessed, ferocious, unstoppable, terrifyingly protective. By the time Terran security reinforcements stormed the hall, 5 extremists were dead, 2 disarmed, and Share lay bleeding, her breath ragged but steady. Elias crawled to her, pressing his hands to the wound near her chest. "Stay with me, damn it," he growled. "You saved us. You saved me." She smiled faintly, teeth glinting. "You chose, well, human." Her laughter was weak but warm. Ending. Weeks later, the galaxy broadcasted the footage. Share, the fat alien girl the human soldier chose, had thrown herself in front of blaster fire to save not only her commander but the very matriarch who once called her a failure. The Threx no longer whispered her name with pity. They spoke it with reverence. Elias visited her in the medbay every day as she recovered. The thick scars across her torso gleamed under the soft light, marks she wore proudly. When she could finally stand again, she found Elias waiting by the viewport, watching the stars drift past. You should be resting, he said without turning. I rested enough, she replied, stepping beside him. The galaxy sings of the human who chose the fat Threx. They do not understand why. He chuckled. Let them wonder. She looked at him carefully. But truly, Elias, why did you? You could have had anyone. He turned toward her. Because when everyone else looked for perfection, I looked for heart. And yours was the strongest I've ever seen. Shara blinked, speechless for a moment. Among my people, strength is measured in scars. Then you're the strongest person in the room, he said softly. Her tail flicked and she smiled, a deep rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate the air. Perhaps, humans are not so strange, she said. Elias smiled back. Oh, we're strange, all right. We just see things differently. Months later, the Terran-Threx alliance became one of the strongest in the quadrant. Trade, science, and defense flourished. And at every ceremony, two figures stood together. One human, one Threx. Symbols of what peace could look like when empathy triumphed over pride. The soldiers still called her Mother Tank. But now they said it with love. And when young recruits asked Elias about that day, why he'd chosen the fat one, he always answered the same way. Because when you've seen the worst of war, you stop chasing beauty that fades and start choosing courage that doesn't. Plug. Years later, a statue was erected on Varkun's new capital. It showed a human soldier and a Threx female standing side by side. Not as conqueror and conquered, but as equals. At the base were the words. He chose not what was perfect. He chose what was true. Part 2. When the galaxy questioned the human's choice, peace was supposed to last. But in the galaxy, peace is just another kind of battlefield. It had been 2 years since the signing of the Terran-Threx Alliance Pact, and Captain Elias Varren had traded his rifle for a command desk aboard the TSS Resolute. His days were filled with reports, diplomatic councils, and endless questions from journalists who still couldn't understand why a human war hero lived with a Threx woman. Why her? What's it like? Is it true you refused all others for her? He'd smile, give a careful answer, and move on. But behind that polite smile, Elias knew something was brewing, something that threatened everything he and Shara had fought to build. The shadow beneath the treaty. Shara had become more than a symbol. She was now a liaison commander, the first Threx ever allowed to serve aboard a Terran ship. Her discipline, insight, and compassion had earned her respect across both species. Even humans who once mocked her behind her back now followed her orders without question. But not everyone was happy. Deep in the outer colonies, remnants of the Sons of Scales, the same extremist group that had tried to assassinate the Matriarch, had begun to stir again. Their propaganda filled the dark web, preaching that Shara was a corrupted broodmother, and Elias a traitor who bedded the enemy. First it was just words. Then it became sabotage. A Threx convoy was destroyed near the colony of Polanis 9. No survivors. The attackers used human weapons. The Threx High Council demanded answers. The Terran Senate denied involvement. Between the two powers, old suspicions began to fester. And caught in the middle were Elias and Shara. The mission. One evening aboard the Resolute, Elias stood by the observation deck, staring into the abyss of stars. He could feel it again, the same tension he'd felt before every war. The silence before the universe screams. Shara joined him, her heavy steps echoing softly. The council blames your people, she said. And your people blame mine, Elias murmured. It's like the war never ended. She turned her head, golden eyes thoughtful. Peace is harder than war. War gives purpose. Peace gives doubt. He glanced at her. And what do you believe? I believe, she hesitated, that someone wants the war back. That someone turned out to be real. A data intercept revealed coded transmissions between rogue Terran officers and Threx extremists, an unholy alliance forged to profit from renewed conflict. The coordinates pointed to Rose Belt, a lawless asteroid cluster. When Command refused to authorize a mission, fearing political fallout, Elias made his choice. He went anyway. The hunt in Rose Belt. Under the cover of a transport inspection, Elias and Shah-Ra led a small team into Rose Belt. The asteroids there were massive, spinning fragments of iron and ice, hiding stations built by smugglers and warlords. Their shuttle, Hawk 3, drifted silently among them, its hull painted black. Inside, the Terran soldiers trusted Elias, but they followed Shah-Ra. Her instincts were sharper than any sensor array. There, she said suddenly, pointing toward a cluster of jagged rocks. Smell that. Smell. One of the soldiers muttered. Ma'am, we're in vacuum. Shah-Ra gave a low chuckle. Not with your nose. With your soul. Something burns there. And she was right. They found a secret depot. Crates of stolen Threx armor, Terran plasma rifles, and communications tagged to both species' military codes. Proof. Proof of betrayal. But before they could transmit the data, alarms blared. A pirate gunship decloaked, its insignia half human, half Threx. The trap was sprung. Fire in the void. Brace! Elias shouted as the gunship fired. The Hawk 3 shuddered, its hull cracking from plasma impacts. Shah-Ra roared, slamming her fists against the controls. We fight! She launched herself through the side hatch into the void, her armor magnetizing to the asteroid's surface. Using thruster bursts, she leapt toward the enemy ship, ripping open a side panel with her claws. Elias followed, rifle blazing, covering her from behind. In seconds, they boarded the enemy vessel, chaos exploding around them. Inside, they found what they feared most. Humans and Threx fighting together, not as allies but as mercenaries of chaos. The leader was a scarred human colonel named Redden, a man Elias once served under. Redden sneered when he saw them. You always were too sentimental, Captain. You and your pet lizard. Shah-Ra growled, tail flicking like a whip. Careful, human. This pet bites. Enough, Elias snapped. You're tearing apart everything we built. Why? Because peace doesn't pay, Varren, Redden spat. War made us kings. Peace makes us beggars. He fired. The shot struck Elias in the shoulder, spinning him backward. Shah-Ra roared and lunged, tackling Redden with bone-cracking force. Her claws pinned him to the deck, but another mercenary swung a shock lance into her side, sending arcs of electricity through her body. Elias, bleeding and half-blind from pain, grabbed his sidearm and fired. 3 precise shots. The mercenary fell. Shah-Ra, gasping, slammed her fist down one final time. Redden didn't rise again. Aftermath. By the time the Terran fleet arrived, the depot was destroyed. Elias's team had transmitted everything before detonating the station's core. The conspirators, both human and Threx, were exposed. The galaxy erupted in outrage, but not in war. The scandal united the two governments in a way nothing else could. For once, both sides saw that corruption and greed were not species-specific. They were universal evils. Elias awoke days later in the medbay. His shoulder bandaged, nerves still numb. Beside him, Shah-Ra sat quietly, her arm wrapped in synthetic fiber, a faint smile tugging at her broad face. You never listen when I tell you to stay behind, he said weakly. You never listen when I tell you I am not fragile, she replied. He chuckled, then grimaced. We make a good pair of bad listeners. She leaned closer. You still think you chose wrong? He looked at her, eyes soft. No. I chose the one who would never run when the galaxy burns. That's worth more than beauty, more than medals. Share's voice was low, almost reverent. Among my people, love is said to be weakness. And among mine, Elias murmured, it's the only strength that lasts. Epilogue. Months later, the galaxy celebrated Unity Day, honoring the exposure of the Rose Belt conspiracy. 2 banners, Terran Blue and Threx Crimson, fluttered side by side in every major system. And in the crowd, as reporters tried once more to ask the old question, Captain, why did you choose her? Elias only smiled and gestured toward Share, now in full command armor, leading a joint honor guard. Because, he said, she never needed to be chosen. The galaxy just needed to see her. Share turned toward him, eyes gleaming. Strange human, she said softly. You fight wars with words better than with weapons. He grinned. Guess I learned from the best. Their hands, one scaled, one scarred, met briefly before the roar of applause drowned everything else. And somewhere beyond the stars, the ghosts of the fallen smiled. Because this time humanity hadn't conquered. It had understood.